You're watching Maine Biz Sunday, Maine's business news source.
With us today, we have Representative Chellie Pingree. Thank you for being here and sticking around. Yeah, that first 8 minutes zips by so fast, of course. And we've got so much to talk about. We did talk about kind of health care and fuel prices. I wanted to go back to just the general economy a little bit, because I'm intrigued with this one. Because you were, when you went to Congress at a very important time in our country, and the stimulus bill and the so-called bailouts, those kinds of things, it depends on who you ask. Did it work? Did it not work? What do you think about that? And more importantly, what would you have done? What should we have done differently, knowing what you know now? What did we learn from that process?
A lot of people don't like to hear this, but when I first came to Congress, the TARP had already been voted on, so I didn't have any opportunity to talk about that, but the stimulus bill was on the table.
It's funny, the TARP usually gets pushed into the Obama campaign.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute.
People think that. But, and frankly, I probably would have voted against TARP because the idea of bailing out the banks didn't seem like a good idea to anyone. But economists in the Treasury now tell us that most of that will be paid back, that the banks didn't use as much as was allocated to them, but it still wrangles people for the right reasons to think these are the people who undermined our economy, and then we had to help them out of the mess.
Wall Street, but not Main Street.
Yeah, and people really feel that way, and I understand it.
Right.
When it comes to the stimulus, we sat through a lot of economists' presentation, and more than anything else, they said to us, you've got to put enough money in if you really want to bring the economy back. People talked about $1.5 trillion, significant numbers, and a lot more money going to infrastructure, transportation, the kinds of things that are vitally important here in the state of Maine. But the compromise was to pull it back under $1 trillion. I think it was around $900 billion. People don't like to hear this, but the fact is we probably should have bitten the bullet and done enough in the beginning.
But we haven't spent all of that yet.
Well, but a lot of it is, I know that's true, and some of it's being pulled back in, but much of that is allocated to be spent. For instance, we're fighting right now to help make sure that the Downeaster line, the extension to Brunswick, gets all of the money it's been promised, let's say. Some of that is stimulus funds that just hasn't gotten through the grant-making process. When people say it hasn't all been spent, some of it is the amount of due diligence it takes, the environmental studies you have to do, all those other things that have to happen along the way. So it's not as if we didn't have plenty of good ideas to use it. Some of it is the money that was going to Florida for high-speed rail, where the governor's turning it back. Well, we'd like to see that money go somewhere else and still be well spent. So when you think about the impact in Maine, it came to the train to Brunswick, which is going to be great for our economy. It went to expanding broadband in rural areas, which is a huge economic development issue. A lot of it went into roads and bridges and smaller infrastructure projects. Frankly, a lot of it went to help the Medicaid program at the state.
Are you surprised that it didn't generate more jobs, though? That we've lagged this much? Nobody's watching. You can tell the truth here.
I wish it had created more jobs, and some people say we should have done more. But let's face it, at the same time, and partly because of lack of confidence in the economy, the private sector is sitting on an enormous amount of cash. Now, you can ask anybody who's involved in the economy, and they say, one thing that would help is if the private sector would start going back to hiring again, would show a little confidence in our economy. And there's a chicken and egg thing going on here. But, for all the people who say, they don't like government spending, well, government can't do it alone. We were doing our best, frankly, to respond to economists who told us we're going into a depression and you got to keep this country afloat.
And part of that was a different piece and was a few years later, but the extension of the Bush tax cuts that happened. The way you said that, geez, I don't think you like that. However, can that be pointed to now and saying, well, that's giving more confidence back to businesses and business owners, and is that part of the effect that we're feeling in terms of some more positive effects in our economy and more consumer spending as well?
Look, I can't rate the impact it's had on confidence, but I hope it does. I would love to think that gives business more confidence, that it makes people feel like, okay, good, this is going in the direction I want. I will say that, there weren't a lot of economic studies that told us that would be helpful to the economy. Only 2% of small businesses, which is where I think we should have our focus, are run by people who would actually qualify for the Bush tax cuts. So in my opinion, it adds something like over $600 billion to the deficit. We're having a big fight in Congress right now that's about how do we reduce the deficit. And I feel like, okay, it didn't help the economy that much. It's a huge tax break to the wealthiest in this country. It's not helping small businesses, and it increases the deficit. I just don't see the value of doing it. But look, it won. It had a majority vote. And if it could help with confidence in our economy, at least we get something out of it.
Another question on taxes, tax code, and loopholes, too, for businesses and corporate loopholes in particular. That's the Obama administration talks about that.
Yeah.
Is that really, will those loopholes ever really be closed, and will they have a significant impact on the deficit if you can do that?
You know, I hope so, and I was glad the President put that on the table, and frankly, one of the reasons he did was he said, look, isn't this a place where Republicans and Democrats could work together? And I think there is general belief that the tax code is too complicated, that big businesses, there was a report that GE, that, you know, makes an enormous amount of money, paid zero in taxes. A lot of corporations complain about the tax rate, but frankly, they never pay it. There's still a lot of money going offshore. There's still a lot of loopholes for people on Wall Street, so I am all in favor of fixing that, and I really hope it's something that we do together, Republicans and Democrats. I think it has the benefit of simplifying it. Frankly, people say, you know, it'll hurt a lot of jobs in the corporate tax industry, the people who make money off of finding these loopholes, but look, we could put that money to better use. You know, the big issue, as everybody knows, in Washington, there is a special interest lobby for every tax loophole out there, and getting people to unite and to say, you know, we've got to do this comprehensively and you know, in a reasonable way, and push back on some of those lobbies. That's the challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting. During an election year, during the election cycle, so many things are the catchphrases, and those words become so popular, and they just kind of go away afterwards.
Yeah.
For example, earmarks. Are earmarks dead or not?
Well,
I know there were bills but they didn't actually get.
Well, pretty much, it'll be an interesting transition, let's put it that way. Earmarks are basically dead. None of us, you know, last year we held public meetings in our district to explain to people how to apply for an earmark. We made everyone who applied for an earmark to our office do a 3-minute tape and actually explain what they were going to do, and we allowed all that to be posted on the web so people could see what this process looks like, so they could actually know where an earmark goes. The challenge is, right now there are no earmarks technically being done. So then we have constituencies like, I represent the Kittery Naval Shipyard. Well, for almost 40 years, all of their military construction work has come through an earmark that the delegation works very hard to get. So recently, we questioned the Secretary of the Navy and said, you know, so what are you going to do? We have to have military construction there. It's important to increase efficiency. It's a big part of the military strategy to have that high-functioning base, and of course we care deeply about it. Well, you know, the delegation was able to announce last week that the Navy's now putting that into the budget. But, you know, that's the stretch, is we have to figure out how to get them to put these things that were formerly, you know, happenstance into their regular budgeting.
Yeah, I'm curious on another one. The $10 million that the University of Maine composites in offshore wind, how big Baggers Group is, that was earmarked, but is that being budgeted elsewhere, do we know?
Good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. But same with the Memorial Bridge, you know, in Kittery, that's another big issue. And, you know, again, people think of earmarks as sort of the bridge to nowhere, but a lot of these are critical money for the university, for research and development.
And I wonder with the university one, there are 35 small businesses that kind of revolve around that immediately. You know, so anyhow, we're going to have to wrap right there. It goes by fast, but we're going to keep you around for an afterthought segment, so we're going to show it on the web. We're going to talk about taxes, some military spending, how it affects the businesses in Maine, collective bargaining, get you to weigh in on all that kind of thing. So all that stuff that's in the news right now. So stick with us. Great. You can catch more of this discussion with Representative Pingree in an exclusive afterthought segment seen only on the web. Just go to MaineBizSunday.com.
Maine Biz Sunday is made possible in part by funding provided by the Finance Authority of Maine. Maine Biz Sunday is brought to you by Bangor Savings Bank, where you can enjoy free ATMs worldwide.